First want to give a shout out to Nancy and all the great folks at the Mvskoke Nation Youth Services. We're always happy to collaborate, whether it's things like this or the hashtag What's Your Plan event. So we enjoy that relationship we have with the youth services department. Nancy asked me about a month ago, what what we could share as a department, what's available, things like that for Mvskoke students. So I thought this would be a great collaboration, and bring part of our series, our Toknawa e Hejida, to take care of money series, to and bring it to the youth services. So again, I'm Pete Coser Jr. I'm the manager of higher ed. What we'll do today is break down what higher education is in the department and everything like that. So do we have the PowerPoint up and ready to go? Okay, awesome. So Toknawa e Hejida, that's the name of our financial literacy series. It's broken down into many different aspects, but when we visited with the folks in the language department and asked them if there was a Creek word for budgeting, and there really was not at the time. So they worked with us and created Toknawa e Hejida, Toknawa meaning money, and Hejida to take care of. So that's where we came up with. So shout out to the language department, great folks over there. A lot of my favorite people. They host a language class, or when everybody was still at the complex, hosted a language class during lunchtime for adult learners, and that was great. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. What we'll talk about today, just give you an overview who is higher education. I could give you the elevator speech. We serve over 1,700 students from associates to PhD level through 8 different funding programs at various levels throughout the higher ed landscape. Give you an idea of the application process and program overview, and then we'll tap into some native college student experiences, some narratives and anecdotes that we received from current students, as well as students who are not Creek, but the students that we've visited from other tribes when we've done institution visits, and just kind of the feedback that we got from them. And then I'll be glad to answer any questions or anything like that. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So who is the Department of Education? We begin with our department mission statement. Our department is committed to providing supplemental financial assistance and opportunities to student citizens of the Creek Nation through travel grants and awards. Our student and culturally centered approach to assistance and student outreach will contribute to the sustainability and the progress of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. So that's basically in a nutshell. We are a total staff of 11, one receptionist, 5 undergraduate grant advisors, 1 postgrad doctoral advisor, 1 assistant scholarship coordinator, 1 scholarship coordinator / administrative assistant, 1 manager, yours truly, and then our higher education director, who is Miss Willeen Lafall, who leads both our department and the Scholarship Foundation. So, this is it in a nutshell. Next slide. we have our service model. So, you know, how do we approach, how do we make sure that students are centered? So what we did when we created this model, service model, was that, excuse me, we took the outline of the church landscape or the ceremonial ground landscape. And if you look at how the layout is when you go to one of our creek churches or ceremonial grounds, there's ways that it's designed. And so what we provide is in the bigger oval there in the middle. And the program scholar is where the center is. The application process is one service that we provide to the scholar. Student services, grant scholarships, funding, additional resources, financial literacy presentations, and then the department process. How do we get those awards from point A to point B? And so this is how we surround each scholar, each one of our 1,700 students that we serve within our department, within this oval. And then there on the right side, you see this, what the results are, where a contributor to student retention, graduation, and travel reinvestment, post-bachelor work, career, whichever step that the student wishes to take beyond graduation. And then outside of our department, these are the aspects to each student. So, you know, you have family commitments, which is a major one. Outside scholarships and grants, FAFSA tends to be another big one. So this is how our department falls within this framework of student success. All right, next slide. So what we have here is higher education flow. Now, students, when you fill out your online application, there's many steps, and it would take a whole nother workshop with Miss Nancy and myself to do. So I try to simplify it as much as we could. For new applicants up top, student completes application, we review it, student notified of incomplete and complete status, and then debit cards, scholarship, award setup, and then there's the middle. At the same time that we're setting up new applications and new students and for funding and enrollment in our programs and things like that, we are also dealing with a set of current students. So as new students are completing and getting their information in the door, we also have our current program students that have that are sending official transcripts and class schedules for their next term. So, you know, I'm pretty blessed to have a staff that works on many different fronts and tries to handle multi-fronts as we progress each semester. So same thing on the bottom, official transcripts. Class schedules are moved to evaluate the transcripts, and statuses are determined. Students are notified and awards are set up, and then the middle is awards sent to debit card or institution. Next slide. This is what it looks like if we were to further detail where point A to point B. And in this case, this is when a student submits their application all the way to the funding cycle. This is just for new students. So you can see it's pretty detailed, pretty complicated task. And again, these are the numerous steps that each staff member takes to go from one area to another in order to help students provide students awards. So I go to the next slide. Guidelines to the application. You know, you can pull up your application, and it's pretty straightforward. We try to be detailed as much as possible and concise. We try to get the information across as quickly as possible on what the details of the department are, the department funding, programming, and requirements. Now, there's a lot of details there, but you know, we try to condense that, but we also try to provide a bunch of different resources to make it understandable. So if we go to the next slide, this outlines, this is in relationship to the undergraduate online application, the undergraduate tribal grant and BIA scholarship. So each part of that narrative describes how each program works. And if you look there towards the middle bottom, you know, there's the tagline, if funds are available. You know, we have a great working relationship with administration and National Council. So knock on wood, we've been able to fund every student at the capacity that they've given us. So knock on wood, we'll be able to continue that. So funds are available, and you know, we're pretty confident in saying that. Next page. So sometimes well, a lot of the times we do get questions about the requirements, the documents. You know, let me be very clear here. Should you ever find yourself doing this on the last day, doing our online application on the very last day, you can still hit submit on your online application and submit it, and submit your documents for your required documents for later submission. The only thing with that is I warn students that if you do that, it could delay and push you further back in the line. So if you're able, please have all your documents, required documents, on the for the online application submission, and make sure that if you do, in the chance that you have to submit without all the documentation, that you get those those pieces of information in soon. So this page describes what's required specifically for the tribal and or BIA grant. Most students either choose tribal grant or both tribal and BIA scholarship. And we'll talk about the required documents for each one of those. All documents have to be submitted in the image file format of TIFF format or PDF. So a lot of your when you scan your documents, you should be able to save it in either one of those file formats, images. And then next slide. So this is where we do get some hangups. With as most, if not all, tribal services require is our citizenship card. And on the left, the top left, that is our Creek Nation citizenship ID. That is your citizenship card that's required. In terms of our department program funding, that is required for your tribal grant. And if you're in the post-grad programs, that is required for your master's and doctoral programs. On the bottom is your CDIB card. Your CDIB is going to be administered through the Department of Interior BIA office. Now, this is a distinction we have to make with a lot of students, is that this card is not administered by the Creek Nation necessarily. This card will come from a lot of times the Mvskoke office. So it's a white card with the Department of Interior's emblem on it, and there in the middle of the card says Certificate Degree of Indian Blood. This card is needed for your BIA/Creek Nation scholarship. And one thing to remember on the BIA Creek Nation scholarship is that it is need-based. So if you are, as you fill out your FAFSA and you received your financial aid report, it will report if you are Pell Grant eligible. Pell Grants are typically given to students who are on a lot of first-generation students, a lot of students who are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, and students who do not have a high EFC. Those most of the time will be the students that get the Pell Grant. And if you're Pell Grant eligible, then you can enroll in, check into our BIA Creek Nation scholarship, which goes back to this card, the CDIB card, the one on the bottom, and check your status with our program. And next slide, please. Other examples of requirements include Department of, or degree plan of study. Students often ask, you know, where do you get these? A lot of times you can get these from your academic advisor, but you can also do a quick Google search and find these degree plans on your school's website. And a lot of times they will be saved as PDF files. So you should be able to download and keep them and upload them onto your online application. And next slide. And other requirements includes letter of acceptance. You know, you get that awesome note in the mail that says you have been accepted. That's the note we're looking for directly from the school. And you'll need to scan that and submit it with to us. And that is for the BIA Creek Nation scholarship only. College transcript. If you have attended college previously, we will need to know where your credit hours stand. There is a threshold with college hours. That's 150 college credit hours that we have for undergraduate students. You must be below that. And then it goes on from there. A lot of these extreme details will also be included in the student handbook that's available for download on our department's website within the Creek Nation website. Next slide. Our goal as a department is to get the awards. Our goal every year is to get it out before November 1st. I know that it says October and November here, but our department takes steps to start funding in September. And with the newer budgets that we received from council this past year, we've been able to fund more students earlier. And so that's the goal. It's always been the goal of the higher ed departments to get the money into the hands of students so that they could use for living expenses or additional education expenses. So those are the steps we take. And then spring semester, February and March, I can say with confidence that our department funded a majority of the students before the COVID pandemic took off and started closing down institutions. So, we were pretty active on that end. And then one thing we do tell students is to plan accordingly. How do you plan accordingly? We'll get into that detail here soon. All right, next slide. So here's what we often recommend to students. Follow the guidelines. A lot of these guidelines will be spelled out on our webpage, but also keep in mind of your institution's guidelines. Budget your finances. This one we cannot stress enough. The cost of school has been passed to the student at a pretty large sum, and you might have all these fees that pop up as you enroll. That's something that you have to be aware about. So plan for finances. FAFSA and other scholarships. Nancy and the Youth Services Department does a great job advertising the multiple sources of scholarships and financial aid. Our department tries to post as much as we can throughout the week and as we come across them. And then get to know the student responsibilities in the student handbook. We have those outlined within the handbook, again, available for download on our website. So next slide. All right. So what challenges do Native students face in college? And again, this is the part of the presentation where we have picked up some narrative, some stories, and there tends to be a lot of similarities between what Native students face as a part of higher education. And so here's what we've come up with, some information to share with the audience. So next slide. So what are some Native cultural, or what are some Native student needs? Native students have often given feedback that they need culture space. We're tribal people still, and we have a strong identity to what we do, our cultural protocols and observances and things like that. And when institutions can have a space where basically Native students can be themselves and identify as themselves, academics, classroom performance, and all of that tends to spike high. And so it is a major contributor to academic success. Native faculty and staff support. Again, when the institutions can have faculty and Native faculty and staff, and these folks are active in assisting the students, that's also a major contributor to higher ed success. Next, we have university committed resources, funding and literature support. A lot of this is also included in university committed scholarships, scholarships directly for Native students. And so it lets the Native students know that, OU, OSU, NSU, UCO, and TCC have direct funding for Native students and want them to succeed. Family and community support. So a lot of times what you find at institutions is it's the community, the local community is pulled together and can uplift these students. This provides a huge relief to students and lets students know that their work is appreciated and that they have direct contact face-to-face. And the final point, financial aid is a contributor, but it's not the main factor. I notice this kind of sounds funny, is like, how do you pay for college and things like that? Um, uh, you know, financial aid and what we do as a department, you know, we help uplift, we provide supplemental funding and things like that. The student is still responsible for performance and classroom performance. And when you invest in classroom performance, the resources start flowing in, is what I try to let students know. It's reflected in the scholarships you receive. It's the internships, it's the opportunities, it's the things like that where people will open doors to see you succeed. And so, again, what we do as a department of higher ed is provide supplemental funding to add a little bit more change in your pocket to help cover up education costs or living expenses, which is much needed, especially in times like now when we're dealing with a world crisis. Next slide. So this is how we do it. Tribal grants are distributed either through Oklahoma State Bank debit cards or students' personal banking. Scholarships are sent directly to schools. And the resources that we've developed as a department and the relationships that we've developed as a department are just some examples of where students can utilize those opportunities for their success, and we encourage that. All right, next slide. So speaking of money, if you get the chance, students, scholars, we've created a budget worksheet for your use, and it's in the tab on our website under the tab Mvskoke Scholar Resources. Again, taking the title of this presentation, Toknawa Hejida, to take care of money. And this is an interactive budget worksheet. This is something we created about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's for your use to help plan out semester and academic year expenses. There's also a budget worksheet that includes living expenses. And so each of these are for your use. They can be downloaded and you know, for your use, personal use. Right. Next resource or next slide. So what can scholars do? Attend financial aid workshops. There's a lot of in and outs on how FAFSA and student loans and Pell Grants, a lot of those programs have a lot of bullet points to them. And being familiar with those financial aid ins and outs will help you long term. Be active with your financial aid scholarship office to build your student income. Student income is your scholarships, your grants, your financial aid loans, things like that. Explore your campus in depth. Get to know people. If you're an engineer major, but you want to help design some places within your tribal land base or wherever, you know, get to know your departments, and you might run into people that are currently doing that. And that leads into the next point: build relationships and friendships. You know, networking is key. Cannot stress that enough. I know that might be something you hear all the time, but building relationships and friendships is something that will help you long term. Considering taking a consumer law economics course, get to know how money flows, and get to know how personal banking, budgeting, household budgeting, things like that. You know, how is money involved in many different areas? And because I'm a hip hop head, that's where I get the Wu-Tang reference there in that bullet point. Participate in financial planning and programming. You know, that's something, again, cannot stress with the amount of unemployment and layoffs and furloughs and things like that. You know, you're gonna need to know about emergency savings and investments and how each of those are going to be impacting what you do as a student and what you do day to day. And finally, indigenize financial literacy and education. You know, what are assets? How do we start talking about money and savings and budgeting to our fellow tribal citizens? And you know, our department took a step, and instead of just calling it a cliche name, you know, we worked with our department to start talking about, well, how did Creek people prepare for the future? How did we save? How do we talk about it? What's the title? And that's where we spawned up Toknawa Hejida. So I do have an announcement on the next slide. So for everyone, new applicants, the deadline for the fall 2020 term, new applications, online applications, has been pushed to June 30th. So if you read on our website, it was originally June 1st, but obviously students right now are hunkered down, maybe trying to take finals or prepare for finals or whatever the case is. So we wanted to assist in any way we can. So June 30th is the new deadline for online new applicants. Current students, your spring term official transcripts and class schedules are now due by July 15th. That's something we wanted to do in case students haven't been able to reach out and visit with their bursar office and arrange their official transcripts to be sent out to our department. In addition to our department being available on a very limited basis as our other departments across the tribe are. You know, this is one way we can help out and relax that burden. So for current students, official transcripts and class schedules are due by July 15th. So with that, here's our contact info on the next slide. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thanks, Pete. That's really great information. Just gonna see if we have any questions from our viewers. If you have one, you can put it in the chat, you can put it in the question answer box, or you can unmute yourself and ask that question on your own if you'd like to. While people are taking some time to think about those questions, I took a few notes for myself. I heard you say with just a big emphasis on that online application, like not waiting until the last day, because that can definitely cause delays in processing and that type of thing. So just wanted to reiterate that to folks, to make sure that you apply early and apply often as those deadlines are. Make sure you're getting the things in that need to. I know that definitely just puts a stressor on the student themselves in trying to get it completed, and then on your staff in the background and trying to get things processed, it sounds like.
Right. And, you know, that's the trend has been each year, especially since I've been there, is that we do have an influx of students come in like the last 2 or 3 days. And if you're within that group of students, then what tends to happen is that information gets jumbled, and we just have to deal with applications and informations information docs, whichever line they fall in. So, that's where we try to be fair and consistent all across the board, and so that's where we try to be do things like work with you and get this information out there. Our community visits when we were able to do them, and things like that. Yeah.
I see one question that's asking, and I'm sure it's just about our current time of the COVID, staying safe at home. Can deadlines be moved around based on how quickly schools are getting back to the students? So maybe if also those schools are probably, working from telecommute at this point too. And so if the student's having a hard time, and this is my assumption of what they're saying, if they send you, information showing where they're trying to get the information, is that something you guys could possibly work with?
Definitely. The last thing we're trying to do is penalize any students or anything like that. Does it bend the rules? Yeah. But at the end of the day, our goal for the department is to get assistance out there, and so that our students can be successful. And when I mean our students, the tribe students.
Right.
And so we've done that in the past. We're taking it case by case by case, but obviously with again, a world crisis, we understand that we'll definitely be more than happy to work with students and try and meet them halfway. Again, we don't want to not leave any students out there without help or some resources.
Good deal. Another question is talking about the College of Mvskoke Nation. We know there were some changes over the last year or so with programs that you all now serve, whereas employment and training used to. Could you talk just a little bit about that? Like, what are those programs and how do they fall under you all?
Okay, so initially, College of the Mvskoke Nation was, from what I understand, was covered by employment and training because it was the CMN was accredited and working closely under OSUIT. And OSUIT is a professional trade school. So when you're dealing with professional trade schools, that's a whole nother level of higher ed, in the sense that these professional schools, you're training to pick up like an electrician journeyman's job or manager job as soon as you walk across stage with your diploma. So it's another level of job training. Do you get some college courses? Of course, but even then, those are very colleges are very selective on what they will and will not accept from professional trade schools. Since then, CMN has become a fully accredited institution through the Higher Learning Commission. So now that they're fully accredited under the Higher Learning Commission, that counts as an accredited school under higher education, our department. So to remain consistent in how we work and get funding to students and make sure there's no murkiness between what we do and employment training and Courtney's folks do. We as a department as a whole, not just us ETA, but when we worked with Secretary Anderson, this is a transition that we made from since then.
I had to unmute myself there. There's another question here, and we didn't really talk about this piece of your program today, but the question is about the graduate and doctoral funding. And I wanted to know, are there any future plans to expand that portion of your program?
Not at this point. I mean, I've been asked why there's not an incentive program for the master's students. Uh, a lot of your master's programs, if not every one of them, require a very high GPA or require nothing less than a B. So I know, Nancy, you and I, we were in the same graduate program at OU. They scared us into, if we made a C, you were out. So, we did not make a C, and we were scared to make Bs. So a lot of your master's, even doctoral programs, won't accept anything lower than a B, and so that's not necessarily an incentive. The incentive is you get to stay in your program. So for right now, I do not see it, but it doesn't mean that things can't be talked about. Obviously, at the master's level, it seems scholarships does this weird thing where we fund a lot of undergrads and provide a lot of opportunities, and then when you get to the master's work, and it just drops off. So what we try to do is provide full-time funding at 9 hours. We try to provide higher amounts for credit hours. And then we work with folks that again, employment training, where they do have a college work experience, where they can do the internship, which is required for a lot of master's programs. And if they can become a part of Kathy and Alicia's work experience program, then that meets the requirement of the master's. Doctoral program currently sits at $7,000 per semester, $14,000 for the year, up to those amounts, tuition, books, and fees. And at one point, it did pay for the entire bill. Problem is that we had a student at Harvard, where Ivy League private school, very high in tuition, books, and fees. And then we had a student at Oklahoma State who is a state school, and the amounts weren't that high. So we had a lot of students on different levels, and at some point we worked with council on to providing a medium so that every student gets something, and that award is still sent directly to the schools.
Bill, when I try to ask this question, I've got a train going in the background of my sound. There's another question kind of just on the same lines of the funding there. How is the amount of funding per credit hour determined?
So there's many different ways that it has been determined. One way was that the department calculated on approximately how much per credit hour did it cost to attend one of the schools, let's say one of the state schools. And at the time, it was, I want to say about $250, but I think the average cost now is about $350. So the intent when the higher education department was created was to supplement, and so keeping in that spirit, this is something that we talk about all the time. Is, well, we have 1,700 students. We would love to take care of everybody's school bill, but logistically and feasible, money-wise, it's probably not going to happen. And so how can we supplement? So that's where You know, the 125 per credit hour comes in. For master's grants, that's where we doubled up because tuition tends to be higher in master's level. And then at the doctoral level, that's where we try to supplement and take care of the remaining costs, because what happens at the doctoral level is a lot of your doctorate level students should have fellowships. When you reach that level of education, they should be paying for you to go to school there. And so that's why they're so selective. They might select 10, 15 students only for that doctoral program. 15 might be a reach, it might be more like 12. So, you know, in those selected will typically receive fellowships.
Okay, good. So I guess I'm hearing you say a lot of just really trying to be consistent with your students you're serving, and then trying to serve as many students as possible with the funding that's available.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, good. Another question we have here is, what happens if a student has been approved for funding, but then ends up dropping out towards the end of a semester?
Great question. So, you know, this is one of those extreme details that we really, you know, we ask students, especially whether it's social media or in their student handbook, to remain in contact should anything change like that. If a student, let's say, receives 1875, so that's 15 hours of 15 credit hours according to our scale. If a student receives 1875 and let's say they just drop out completely, then kicks in many different options. One, the student can refund that money to us, and they'll be put on good standing should they re-enroll in the spring, for instance. If they drop down to 12 hours, then that kicks in our probation and our suspension parts. Under 3 hours is probation, which means that they'll still get the travel grant the following term, but they may not be eligible for the incentive grant. But if they dropped 3 or more hours, that's suspension. So they're not eligible to receive it. You know, a lot of times that tends to happen when students don't communicate to us. We understand that things change during the year. And part of it is, you know, as you're reporting your class schedules and things like that to us, financial aid or your scholarship award providers or whatever, you know, they're entrusting that pot of money to you, and so you can complete this set amount of hours. And if you don't meet those hours, you know, you're not meeting the requirements of the program. So that is a requirement of the program that we have in our department. And so that's how it works. Sometimes it happens with GPA, and you know, students might just have had a bad semester. You know, it happens. You know, family member passes away, they have to go back home, they have a medical issue, mental health issue. You know, unfortunately, we've come across some incidents where it's include violence and domestic violence and things like that. You know, again, the last thing we want to do as a department is shortchange and not provide any resources. And you know, we're not like the guards on Lord of the Rings say you can't go there kind of thing. You know, we try to be reasonable and provide as much as we can.
Okay, that's good. So I think it really comes back to what you were saying, like communication is key, and then
Mhm.
just relationship, like getting with whoever your case manager. I'm not sure what you call them in the office, but the staff person that you're assigned to, and making sure that they kind of know what's going on. And we know that sometimes that's difficult for folks to kind of share what's happening in their lives, but in this instance, it's really important to make sure that you let them kind of know what's happening so that your office can work with them.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Last question that I have here is there a limit to the number of total credit hours that can be funded for while working on a degree?
Yes. So for undergraduates, it's 150. So a lot of your undergrad programs, the credit hour to earn a degree typically is 120 and 130. You know, if you're in nursing or engineering, obviously that's going to be a lot higher because there's a lot more requirements. And if students meet that threshold and they're graduating soon thereafter or that next semester or something, we've worked with students uh, to get some resources, some funding from our department. So again, that's not just us. That's all across the board. A lot of your scholarship providers are like that. FAFSA is like that. And so, that's just something to keep in mind as students progress in the future. And if they have any questions, they're more than, for these extreme details, they're more than welcome to contact myself, Jerry on the Hill, who's our scholarship officer. One of us to be happy to work with you halfway again. No, that's a great question, and I'm glad it was asked. But yes, 150, and then I believe it's 90 hours for the master's program. So if you look at it altogether, 150 hours is approximately five years in undergrad. So unless I'm always thinking of the movie Tommy Boy, where he said he was in school for 7 years.
Sometimes that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's at least a time frame to work with. That's good. Well, I went ahead and reshared the contact information for your program, so folks will have that. And then just wanted to share real quickly